everybody, welcome back. We've today got the final prototype, quote-unquote final prototype of the Console JAMMAizer here. And what I want to do is go through and demonstrate and just explain, give a basic overview of everything that it does, because this right here is feature complete. This is not the final revision of the board. There's one more revision that that I just finished up that is going to be the production board. All the features that are on this one represent the features for the final board. There are just a few minor changes that had to occur between this prototype and the final board, but it is done now. This project is actually done. So I'm going to go through all the features of this system again for anyone who hasn't seen the previous videos or read through the thread or anything like that on arcadeprojects.com. This is going to explain everything you need to know about what the Console JAMMAizer is, how it works, and what features it has. So to start with, what is the Console JAMMAizer? Well, simply the name kind of gives it away, but what it is basically a device that is designed to allow you to connect standard home game consoles through RGB, either through SCART or through VGA, to your JAMMA arcade cabinets. It has a JAMMA edge on the other end. How does it do this? Well, essentially built into this board is a THS7375 video amp. It provides 15 decibels of video gain, and essentially that is what is taking the low voltage 75 ohm video signals from the SCART or from the VGA, and it's amplifying it up to the high impedance video signals that the JAMMA arcade monitors are expecting to receive. So that's the basic functionality on the video side. Now it also has a sync separator, an LM1881 sync separator, so if you have a source like the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 for example, which does not output clean C-Sync, the LM1881 is in circuit there providing clean C-Sync for you to use. That way you can eliminate any kind of sync related compatibility issues with any of your hardware. It's just pure C-Sync that comes out of here. Next to that is audio amplification. JAMMA arcade cabinets, unless they are non-standard, like ones with built-in stereo amplification or things like that, normally the game PCB provides amplified audio for the speakers that are built into your cabinet. So this board takes the line level audio from the SCART or the VGA line input, and it amplifies it to drive the speaker in your cabinet. It is mono amplification. It implements, there's a audio summing circuit, a stereo summing circuit integrated in here as well. So it takes the left and right channels and sums them together, so you don't get stereo audio because your cabinet, if it is a standard JAMMA cabinet, is a mono cabinet anyway. But there is stereo audio out, so if you have an amplified stereo cabinet, you can run your video source in through SCART, and then you can plug your audio from your cabinet amplifier into the left and right audio outputs here through RCA. There is volume control for the amplifier built in here. There's also gain control on the amplifier, so if you have a really quiet source and you need to up the gain for the input signal, you can, and that will not affect the volume control, or that'll increase the internal gain of the chip if you're not getting the level of volume you need. Now this audio amplifier is an LM386, which is a pretty low power amplifier. It is rated at 3 watts of maximum peak output. Should be plenty for an arcade machine. I have run it on dedicated speakers to see how loud they get. I've amped my cabinet, my New Net Cities speakers directly, unplugged them from the stereo amp, and just wired this circuit directly to the speakers, and it produces tons of sound. And to my ears, it's louder than anybody. It's capable of getting louder than anybody would want to have in their home setup. If it is not loud enough for you, I don't really know what to tell you. You must be in running an actual arcade, and I don't know. I really don't think anybody would need more sound than that, but if you do, there is always the option of taking the stereo output and running that to your own dedicated amplifier and amplifying your cabinet in that way. But this built-in amplifier should be good for 99% of people who will be using this. Okay, so those are the core video and audio functionalities. Alright, now the next thing is going to be controls. For controls, what we have here is the 20-pin header. There's a 20-pin header for player 1 and player 2, and these are formatted in the same format that you would find like Brook retro boards, and then also the custom MC Cthulhu PCB that I make. Right here, there's two of them together, but this is a custom MC Cthulhu PCB I make that you slot the standard MC Cthulhu chip into, and it shapes it like a Brook retro board. Essentially follows that form factor instead of the traditional MC Cthulhu form factor, and you get the 20-pin header. So the 20-pin header provides controls to the JAMMA Edge. So when you press buttons on your cabinet, they go into the Brook retro board or the MC Cthulhu board or the Brook Ultimate, the Universal Fighting board, whatever you got, and then that plugs into your console. And that's how controls are handled. Now, the JAMMA Edge supports the standard JAMMA pinout plus the additional buttons optionally. So you've got on the JAMMA Edge you have up, down, left, right, start, coin, which is wired to select if you end up using it that way. And then there's also buttons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then button 6 is switchable on or off. Some cabinets may be wired for JAMMA, which is the non-standard kind of Chinese wiring standard, quote unquote, that the Pandora's boxes and other like emulation solutions like that use. If your cabinet's wired for it, you can turn it on. If your cabinet's not wired for it, you can turn it off. Whenever it's turned off, it actually grounds that pin so that it normally, because normally the last two pins here on the end of the JAMMA connector would be ground. And some cabinets rely on the ground that is on that pin for controls. So I've made it switchable to where that when the JAMMA button is switched on, then it becomes button 6, and then whenever you switch it off, it switches it back to ground, so that if your cabinet's not wired for JAMMA, this will have no effect on the functionality of your cabinet. Aside from that, the other major feature of the control system is this microcontroller right here. This microcontroller was designed, well, the code on it was written by Rgb, the creator of the Haas Supergun. You probably know him. I reached out to him. He was helping me out on some of the electrical engineering on the video circuit, and he's helped out on a few different things here with this project. And I reached out to him to see if he would be interested in providing a microcontroller to do button mapping. And he obliged, and so that's going to be part of this program, part of this product now, is the button mapping IC. So what can you do with this button mapping IC? Well, it works in the same exact way as the Haas Supergun or the Rico PCB that he designed years back. Essentially, buttons 1 through 6 are remappable any way that you want. You can map button 1 to button 4 and button 6 to button 3 and so on and so forth. Switch them around however you want. And then there's also rapid fire functionality built into this chip as well. So you can set rapid fire functionality on any button that you want out of 1 through 6. And there's multiple different modes. You can set different firing rates. And also there is a switch here for synchronous and asynchronous mode, whether it syncs to VSync or if it's just an arbitrary number that it uses, a arbitrary rate that it uses to handle auto fire. So fully featured as far as that's concerned. Very pleased with this setup, and it works wonderfully. What you're going to find is that with a lot of games, the control layouts don't make any sense on an arcade machine. Where they made perfect sense on a controller, on an arcade machine it doesn't make nearly as much sense. So This remapping functionality, I think, is critical to having a good experience playing consoles on arcade machines, and I'm totally thrilled that RGB was willing to work with me on setting these up. Now the next thing that we're going to talk about is additional auxiliary controls. We have auxiliary harnesses here for some of the extra controls that can't be carried on the JAMMA Edge. You have buttons like select and home for like PlayStation 3 users, or guide for Xbox 360 users if you're using a universal fighting board and an Xbox 360 and a VGA cable to play like classic shmups and stuff from the Xbox Live Arcade. This is going to be useful to you. So you can add home and select for player 1 and player 2 on this using these little headers. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to attach a wiring harness to here, and then you can run that to your control panel, or if you have an auxiliary panel on your cabinet that you have extra buttons wired to, you can add the extra buttons for player 1 and player 2. Also, if you don't want to do that and you have easy access to your cabinet door where you can just open this up and press buttons on here, there are switches for select and home for player 1 and player 2. So if you just need to press one of those buttons and you don't want to run extra wires for it, you can just press the buttons right there. So multiple options there. Then there's also select and home emulation that can be done. Back here, this is how it's done. It's not part of the microcontroller. This is actually separate from the microcontroller. This is a logic gate based solution, and you'll notice there's some bodge wires here. That's because, like I said, a couple of changes had to be made for this final PCB, but this is a logic gate based solution, so there's no code, no programming here. This is purely being done using OR and NAND gates. So basically the way it works is, if you want to press select without running extra buttons or anything like that, what you do is you press button 1, button 2, and start simultaneously, and that'll press select. And if you want to press home, you press button 3, button 4, and start simultaneously, and that'll press home. That works for player 1 and player 2. And when that emulation occurs, what you definitely want to press button 1 and 2 and then start last, because the way that this works is it's an exclusive start is an exclusive button press. So if you're pressing button 1 and 2 and start last, then start will only press through a select. It disables the actual start button press, so you don't accidentally pause the game while you're trying to press select. And same for home. If you press button 2 or button 3 and 4 and then press start, it does not send the start signal, it only sends the home signal, so you can't accidentally pause the game then hit home. That way the button presses, the button combos will never interfere with the actual functionality of sending select or home. And then if you're not pressing button 1 and 2 or button 3 and 4, then just pressing start will send start just like normal. Okay, well, hopefully all that made sense. This is pretty much the main features. Now, as far as other things on controls, the kick harness is a CPS2 style kick harness, so that's going to be the majority of cabinets. If your cabinet's not wired with a CPS2 style kick harness, they're easy places to get. You can get adapters to CPS2 from any other kick harness type very easily. But aside from that, that pretty much covers all the main functionalities on the main PCB. There's a couple of adjustments you might want to make depending on your setup. So there is Rgb Impedance Adjustment here. Now from the factory, I will set this in the way that makes the most sense to me, what looks the best on my cabinet, which is about 475 ohms of impedance on the impedance potentiometers. But if you get it to your home and you feel that brightness or contrast isn't quite right, you might go in here and adjust the impedance to match it to your monitor. It could vary from monitor to monitor. Testing, my testers that have tested on several different monitor types don't seem to have any issues with the default settings that I've got, but who knows what kind of monitor you'll end up with and how it'll look. The other adjustments are on audio. So you have the JAMMA audio on and off switch, and what this does is it allows you to turn the audio amplification off completely. So if you're using stereo output and you're not using the amplified audio, you can just turn it off, and then it's not even going through the amplifier at all. It's just nice to have in case you have no need for the JAMMA audio and there's no reason to be outputting amplified audio. Otherwise, if you have it on, then amplified audio and stereo line out will both be working simultaneously. Now the last thing is going to be on the VGA hat, a little explanation of how this is set up. The VGA hat can work in one of two ways. First of all, you've got VGA input and you've got a 3.5mm line audio input. Okay, this is perfect for computers if you're running MAME or something like that. If your source can output C-Sync on VGA, which some can, then you will have the sync separator that is built in, or sorry, the sync combiner that's built in right here. That can be turned off. If you have the sync combiner turned off, then it sends just C-Sync to the C-Sync pin over here on the hat that goes down into the main board and goes to the amplifier. If you have a source that only puts out HV sync, like standard VGA or Dreamcast VGA output, what you're going to do is flip this switch here to turn the sync combiner on. With the sync combiner turned on, any horizontal and vertical sync signals can be combined into a C-Sync signal, which will go in through the amplifier and out to the JAMMA edge just like normal. So that's really all there is to it. It's just there is a sync combiner. It can be turned on or off depending on your needs at the time. The other thing about the sync combiner is that if you are going to leave the VGA hat on all the time, which is what I do, I mean, I see no reason not to. If you are using a SCART input, you need to make sure that the sync combiner is turned off, because the sync combiner being turned on, even if there's no signal coming through it, it can interfere with the C-Sync signal coming in from the SCART connector. So the best practice is just keep it turned off unless you're using a VGA source. Figured that some people might run into that issue, and I just wanted to address it up front. Okay, that pretty much covers all the features of the Console JAMMAizer. What we're going to do now is go to my arcade cabinet, and we're going to hook this up, and I'll actually go through and show you everything working. So we'll see you there. Okay, so let's go through the demonstration of the functionality of the Console JAMMAizer. I have it hooked up to my new Net City cabinet through a Jammifier. I know it's a pretty similar name, but the Jammifier takes the JVS I/O and converts it into a JAMMA edge. So I've got it hooked up through my Jammifier, but this would be the same for a normal JAMMA cabinet as well. And you see what we've got. We've got the Brook Retro board on player 1, and then we have one of my MC Cthulhu boards on player 2. So let's go ahead and fire it up, and you'll see what it normally looks like whenever it turns on. So when it fires up, the LEDs for player 1 and player 2 will flash there to let you know that the button mapping IC is booting up. And then we're going to go ahead and fire up. We've got the PlayStation 1 hooked up right now, so we're going to go ahead and fire that up. We'll wait for my PSIO to boot up. Okay, so what I'm going to demonstrate here is the button remapping. So we got it mapped normally right now. So you've got let's see here. Where's a PlayStation controller? Look at reference. I think it's a square, triangle, L or R1, I think, and then X, circle, R2, I think. So anyway, let's go ahead and boot up Mega Man, and I'll show you how little sense Mega Man makes on arcade hardware with default button mapping. 0, because whoever played Mega Man X4 is Mega Man. Okay, so watch this. In default mapping, jump is button 4, fire is button 1, and dash is button 5. This is a completely nonsensical button map, and it's very inconvenient to play like this. So, what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and switch into button mapping mode. So the way you do this is just like on a Rico PCB. You're just going to press and hold 2 buttons and start simultaneously until your LED comes on to let you know that player 1 is in button mapping mode. And the way we're going to map Mega Man X4 is we're going to map, you'll see that you watch the LED down there. So you're going to see that every time I press the LED, or press the button, one of the buttons is going to confirm with the LED down there. So the way you do the mapping is, for each button that you want to map, you press it the number of times that corresponds with the button you're trying to map it to. So for button 1, we're going to keep that as 1. So we're going to press it once. Button 2, we're going to map as jump. So that's going to be button 4. So we'll hit 1, 2, 3, 4. And button 3, we're going to map as dash, and that's button 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now you hit start to exit out of button mapping mode, and now you can see jump is button 3 and dash is button 4, jump is button 2 and dash is button 3. So now you can conveniently play Mega Man X4, and with one hand. It's pretty hard to do, but anyway, Mega Man X4, well, any Mega Man game pretty much is going to be unplayable almost in standard button mapping unless you have a remappable button layout, which we do here. So now with this remappable button layout, Mega Man is actually a really playable game on an arcade machine, and is actually really fun to play on a cabinet. So that's your demonstration of PlayStation. The next thing we'll demonstrate, and PlayStation has, like I said before, PlayStation has does not output C-Sync. It outputs composite video for sync, or Luma, depending on how your cable is wired. Next, we're going to demonstrate actual C-Sync from a Sega Saturn. So let's go ahead and fire the Sega Saturn up, and we'll switch controls. This is the Sega Saturn controller wire. Yeah, I'm using pseudo Saturn Kai. I have a Phoebe, but I haven't set it up yet. Because my disk drive actually does work well in my Saturn, so it kind of hurts my feelings to think about replacing it with a Phoebe. Okay, so we got Metal Slug loading up for the Saturn. And what we're going to do is, preemptively, we're going to go in here to the button mapping and remap buttons again. Okay, so now buttons are mapped back to the standard mapping. We'll go ahead and load this up. So, for certain games, you might want to do like a Neo Geo layout where it's like A, B, C, D. And then you've got all 4 buttons in a row like a Neo Geo control setup, or like a game like Metal Slug where you only have 3 buttons. You know, the button map doesn't necessarily need to be adjusted, but let's say you want to set rapid fire. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the button map here, and we're going to add rapid fire we're going to add a rapid fire shoot button separate from the main fire button. So we've got button A here on button 4 of the cabinet. So we're going to add button 4 to button 1 so that it can be a second fire button. So let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So now the buttons are mapped like so. So you've got standard fire, you got jump, and you have bombs. Alright, so now let's say you want to set rapid fire on button 1. So what you're going to do is you're going to press and hold down one button and start simultaneously until a light comes on, and then that enters rapid fire mode. Once you're in rapid fire mode, you press the button the corresponding number of times, whichever button you want to program rapid fire on, you press that button the number of times that corresponds to how fast you want it to fire. So we'll just set it to half of VSync, which is just one button press. So press that once and save it. And now you have rapid fire. Alright, let's see here. Oh, there you go. So 2 button presses. Sorry, my mapping was not correct, or my memory was not correct of this. So there you go, you got rapid fire. Pretty cool. And that's programmable to any of the 6 buttons. So there you go. That's the functionality of the microcontroller, the button mapping controller, which is pretty sick. So now that we've demonstrated that, let's go ahead and demonstrate VGA. Whoops, I guess I didn't need to turn off the cabinet. Okay, so I'll go ahead and turn off the Saturn. Switch everything over to the Dreamcast. Plug in our VGA connector. Whoops, upside down. And let's see. Here's our 3.5 millimeter audio. Forgive me. I'm gonna have to use 2 hands for this. Okay. So now the Dreamcast is completely hooked up. Let's go ahead and fire it up. Oh, and turn on the sync combiner. And there's Dreamcast through VGA, amplified and put out on the JAMMaEdge. Now this is a tri-sync monitor that I've got here, so I can put out 31 kilohertz, 480p to this monitor, no problem. But your monitor may only be a 15 kilohertz monitor that you're using. And if that's the case, then you'll want to have a 15 kilohertz switchable VGA cable or a retro access SCART cable. Retro access Dreamcast SCART cable has a switch on it that lets you switch between 15 kilohertz and 31 kilohertz. In which case you don't need the VGA hat, but the VGA hat is good for a lot of different things. Okay, so that's pretty much all there is to the sync combiner and the VGA hat. I mean, that's really pretty simple. So the last thing to demonstrate here is going to be the select and home emulation. And the way I'm going to do that is actually, I'm going to fire up my laptop here, and I'm just going to show you the Gamepad settings on my laptop. I know this is a boomer way to capture the screen, but you know, you do what you have to. Okay. Give me just a second. Okay. So, got my gamepad loaded up here. And now what you're going to see, if I can get it to focus. Okay, so you got your your normal button presses and whatnot. You got your rapid fire that I had set up from earlier, and then you know, some normal button press. So here's start. That shows up as button 9, I believe. Or no. Yeah, start is button 10. So now let's say we want to do select. So we hold button 1 and 2 and select is pressed and start. So on this board it's actually button 3 and 4 and start. That's not how the final board's going to be. But so you get button 9 instead of button 10 because button 9 is select. Now let's say we want to do 3 and 4 and start, and you get button 13 on the Gamepad Manager because that's home. And then if you press nothing, just start, then you get start. So as you can see, it's exclusive. The start button press is exclusive to only if you're not pressing any of the other combinations, so you can't accidentally send start and select at the same time. Well, gosh, I think that's a complete overview of everything that this thing can do. If I missed anything, I'll make sure to update you guys with that, but otherwise, it's pretty much done. I'm going to start accepting pre-orders now. So if you want one, go to the Arcade Projects forum link that's going to be in the bottom of this video, and yeah, put in your pre-order. I'm going to go into production. Hopefully we'll be able to get everything together within the next month as far as logistics of getting everything produced and pulled in and assembled. So looking forward to it. It's very exciting. This has been a long project, very difficult, lots of different challenges to overcome, but I think I've really pulled together something excellent here, and with the help and assistance and encouragement of the community over at Arcade Projects, it's been wonderful. I wouldn't have been able to do it all without them. So looking forward to going into full production. We'll see you next time.